Hello, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here and to have the opportunity to share with you all about my experiences in Nigeria in October of last year. I just wanted to start off with a bit of a disclaimer. This talk in no way is a talk about a strong young woman overcoming great trials, or really anything of that sort. I'm not here to try and big myself up or to try and get some pity. My real purpose in being here is to tell God's goodness in, really for me, some of the most unexpected and hardest experiences of my life so far. So I hope that comes across. I hope that's what you're left with as you leave here tonight, because that's, as I say, really why I've come to speak. So just a bit about myself. As I say, my name's Alanna. I'm now 25 years old. I wasn't 25 in this picture. I'm born and bred in Northern Ireland, which hopefully you can still tell by my accent. Grew up on a farm in County Antrim and was very blessed growing up. I grew up in a Christian household where going to church and Sunday school, things like that, were really very common. And I think about the first time I remember asking for forgiveness of my sins, I was probably about 7 years old. And at that point, it was really because I was scared of hell. Hell's a scary place. I didn't want to go there. So I remember asking God for forgiveness of my sins at that point. But it didn't influence my life much. As I started off being a teenager, I still looked for happiness in other ways, whether that be through trying to get good grades or through being popular, through my appearance, things like that there. And all of this was really very unsatisfying. I couldn't find any fulfillment that lasted any length of time, and really I was just very discontent in and of itself. And when I was about 16, I was going into one of my final years of high school. There was 2 really sudden deaths in my high school, and this for me was really very poignant, a real changing point, because people don't die when you're young. At least that's what I thought at that time. And when those 2 young people passed away, it really made me question what I was doing with my life. Was I just a Christian because that was the way I'd been brought up? Or is this something I really wanted to follow and believe in? So at that age, I started to really look at what the Bible taught and what Christianity taught. Did it have all the answers to those big life questions? Where does the world come from? What's our purpose in being here? And what happens after we die? And there was nowhere else that I could find answers that gave the depth and the magnitude that Christianity and the Bible offered. So around that age, I started to really take my faith a lot more seriously, around about 17 years old. When I was 19, I headed to university. I studied back home in the University of Ulster. I did a degree in optometry. And after I graduated, I moved over here to Scotland for work. I didn't want to move to Scotland. I had never heard of Fife. I'd never even heard of Kirkcaldy, or Kirkcaldy, as I thought it was back then. And I was very anxious. I was really happy being at home with my family. Why would I want to come to Scotland? Why would God take me to Scotland? And as I've been here for the last 2.5 years, I've learned that Scottish people are quite nice. Just quite. And they're not bad at all. And I'm really thankful that I ended up here. I ended up here in Kirkcaldy. So as I say, I started work in 2015 then, working as an optician. And I enjoyed my job. I did enjoy it, but I struggled just with how secular it was. And for that reason, I started to look about avenues in which I could do my job, be an optician, but also share my faith and do mission. And that's how I came across the charity Mission for Vision. Mission for Vision was a charity set up and ran by a man called Ian Squire. And Ian had been going out for the last number of years to different parts in Africa and helping with the eye care, but more importantly, sharing with people about God. And that for me was really exciting, because that's what I wanted to be a part of. Ian told me about a trip that he had coming up, working alongside another charity called New Foundations. Youth Foundations is a charity set up and run by David and Shirley Donovan, who Adam mentioned are here tonight, so if you've got questions about it, ask them. And they, again, had been going to and from Nigeria for the last 14 years, and they had set up a health clinic in Nigeria, which helped the surrounding community with healthcare. They trained and employed several, at that time, 27 Nigerian healthcare workers, but also was there to minister the love of God to the surrounding community. So that's who I was going out to work with. We headed out on the 7th of October. We were only meant to be going for a week. In my head, I was thinking, what can go wrong in a week? So this is a photo of us just after we landed. We landed in the city called Port Harcourt, and that was my first, I think, reality shock. Voted the worst airport in the world. I wouldn't recommend to fly there. But we landed there and stayed at a hotel the first night, and then the next day we travelled out to the clinic that we were going to be working at for that next week. In order to get to the clinic, you had to travel about 3.5 hours by car and then a small boat journey, because the clinic that we were working at and the bungalow that we were staying in were both located up alongside a creek. So this here is a picture of the bungalow that we were staying at that first week then. This building David and Shirley had built a few years earlier to use as a place of residence when they were staying in Nigeria, but also to kind of be used by the healthcare workers to get together as well. As you can see, it's a really very secure building. At no point did I feel unsafe there. What you can't see in the picture is a 6-foot wall that's surrounding the building as well, so it was very secure. This here is a picture of the clinic then that we were working at. As I say, for the last number of years, David and Shirley had been training up different workers from the surrounding community who ran the clinic throughout the year and provided healthcare to the surrounding community. I was working in the eye test room that you can see here. So Ian had brought equipment over for the test room, and you can see it looks very like a UK test room, to be honest, with kind of all the modern equipment that you would expect. And that's what I was working at that week. Ian and myself were training a couple of the guys in eye care, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Working alongside people that were so eager to learn, but also had the same end goal, to help with healthcare, but to tell people about God. So it was really, really very exciting and enjoyable. So we were doing that from the Monday through to the Thursday. And then the Friday morning, we were meant to be going back to the hotel to fly back to the UK on the Saturday. So the Thursday night, we then had a celebratory meal just for the week that had passed. You can see here in the picture a number of the healthcare workers gathered round for food there. And then just on this picture, over to the side, you can see it's a photo of myself, Ian, and 2 of the guys that we've been training. When we've been training them, we've been putting them through some exams, and a couple of them passed the exams, so we received certificates for that. And the picture at the side, the one of Ian and myself, for me is a really poignant picture as I look back. Little did we know that within 2.5 hours, 3 hours, we would be kidnapped from the building that we were staying in. And I think it just goes to show you, in life, you don't know what to expect. Expect the unexpected, as silly as that sounds. And if you're here and you're a Christian, maybe you've got big plans for your life. I'm one that likes to have big plans for my life, but God always changes them. But be reassured of the fact that no matter what God changes in your plans, that He will be there with you as you go through that. Maybe you're here and you're not a Christian, and as I say, expect the unexpected. Don't put off those big life questions that I was talking about. Don't think about it as something that you'll deal with when you're old, but do it now. Don't put off what can be done today. So that night, I headed to bed probably around 11 o'clock. This is a picture of the bedroom that I was staying in. Obviously, the photo was taken earlier on in the week. And I fell asleep fairly quickly. I remember praying that night. I loved my time in Nigeria so much. I remember praying God Though I would really love to be here for longer. You really have no idea what you're praying for when you pray. But as I say, I went to bed around 11 o'clock and fell asleep. And about 12:30, the fan in my room cut off. Obviously, Nigeria's climate's a lot hotter than here. So you've got a fan running throughout the night. And the fan cutting off, for some reason, woke me up. And it was probably about 12:30 when that happened. And me, maybe being a bit naive or just really have no idea what was happening, just figured the power must have cut out. We were in a really rural area, so the power wasn't overly reliable. So my first thought was the power must have stopped. Within a few minutes of the fan stopping, I started to hear loud bangs. Again, I didn't think anything really other than it must be some of the healthcare workers trying to get the generator to work, trying to get the electricity back on. It wasn't until the front door burst open that I realised there was something up. Within seconds of hearing the front door open, I could hear the same banging at my door, and the men were in my room within minutes. And I remember coming out of the bedroom and just standing there and seeing this man with this combat uniform and this massive automatic rifle, and just how surreal it felt, like something of a nightmare, but it was real, and I couldn't even quantify it in words, just how surreal it felt. After they removed me from my room, they removed Ian from his room, and then David and Shirley from their room, and then took us out of the compound. They left all of the other healthcare workers and all other people in the building at the bungalow. They took us from the bungalow onto a boat. As I said, the bungalow and the healthcare clinic were both located right beside a creek. So most of the travel was done by boat there. As we got onto the boat, thoughts began to fill my head. I had never been in Nigeria before. I'd never even been in Africa before. I had absolutely no idea of where we were going. I had nothing that I could offer to the situation, and really I just felt utterly helpless and lost. The only thing that I felt certain of was that I was going to be taken and killed. And as all these thoughts were going through my head, one verse kept coming back and back again. And it's verse 10 from Psalm 46. I'm sure some of you have heard it before. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's just enough to be still and know that He is God. Maybe you're going through a situation right now and you're asking all these questions and it feels like you have no way to control anything. Be still and know that He is God. He is sovereign. He is in control. And although you have nothing to offer, He does. Be still and know that I am God. So they took us on the speedboat for about 45 minutes at full pace. And we were going down this main creek, but after a while we turned off into the jungle area. Just to give a bit of explanation around that, the time of year that we were in Nigeria, it was rainy season. So usually this jungle area would be dry, but because of the time of year, there was about 5 feet of flooding. So it meant that they could take the boat into the jungle area, and we were a lot more hidden in that regard. And they took us well into the jungle area and left us on a structure similar to these ones here. So it was a wooden structure, completely surrounded by water. Obviously in the picture here, it's a village. We were in a structure that was completely by itself. So there was nothing that we could see other than shrubbery around us. And they left us there that night. They didn't leave any gang members with us. That first night, they left us alone. And we knew that they were within near distance because we could hear them, but we couldn't see them. I remember waking up that next morning and you just kind of sinking in what had happened, and where we were, and the fact that we had no control. And the thing that really got to me was the thought of my family finding out. There's no time difference between where we were in Nigeria and the UK, so I knew within a few hours that my parents and my brother and my two younger sisters would find out what had happened, and that was really very difficult. That was really very hard not to be able to call them and let them know that I was okay, and to reassure them of that. And for the first time, I broke down in tears. And at that point, it was a real blessing to have both David, Shirley, and Ian there to comfort me. We comforted each other, not only that morning, but throughout the time. And it was such a blessing not to be alone, but to have them there with me. Two things happened that morning. The gang members came to us and told us the reason that they had taken us was for ransom. It was just all about money, is what they said. They were wanting a billion Nigerian naira, which in sterling is 2.1 million pounds. And I don't have, I don't have 2.1 million pounds. Was what my initial thought was. So that just added to the insurmountable of the situation, the lack of control, the lack of things that we could offer to us. They were asking for this money that we knew we had no way, even if we could provide it, we had no way of getting it to them. That morning though, they also asked us if there was anything that we needed. And thankfully, Ian said that we would like a Bible. And shortly after that, they brought us a Bible. I cannot tell you how much of a blessing that was throughout our time, how much we relied on that. I'm not saying that like we were really holy people, but I'm saying that because it's the only thing that kept our heads focused on what was right. And that morning, as we lay there in the structure and it was my turn to have a go at the Bible, I turned to Proverbs chapter 3. Growing up, Proverbs 3 has always been one of my favourite chapters in the Bible. I really like a few of the verses at the start of the chapter. But as I read it that morning, I came to the verses at the end, and I had never noticed them in the way I had up until that point. I'm going to read them out for you now, and you'll be able to see why they were so important to us that morning. So verse 24, Proverbs 3 says this: "When thou liest down, thou shalt not be afraid. Yea, thou shalt lie down, and thy sleep shall be sweet. Be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of the desolation of the wicked, when it cometh. For the Lord shall be thy confidence, and shall keep thy foot from being taken." What a reassurance that morning to have those verses speak directly into the situation. You felt that they were written for that point. And what a reassurance to me at that time to know that God was still in control. The first morning that we were there was also the morning that Ian Squire was killed. For some reason, whenever they took us, they also took Ian's guitar. They didn't really take any other possessions other than his guitar and a few laptops. But they left the guitar at the structure that morning. And up until this point, personally anyway, it was almost a false sense of security. The men had been as nice as you could expect and had given us a Bible. So I guess there was, as I say, a false sense of security about us. And we decided that morning to gather around and sing a hymn together. So we sang, sitting in a circle, we sang Amazing Grace. And after we had finished singing, Ian stood up and was instantly shot and killed. We were told later on that the reason that Ian was killed was because we were making too much noise. But I remember hearing that night, overhearing, a couple of them saying that it was a good thing that Ian had died because it would teach us a lesson. So I think that's likely more of the reason. I don't know why God allowed Ian to die. I don't have all of the answers. But one thing that I am fully reassured of is the fact that Ian is now in heaven. And that's not because Ian was a good man, although he was, but that's because he had faith in God. The night before we were taken, I had the privilege of being able to hear Ian's testimony, how God had come and impacted his life while he was travelling through Australia. And from that point on, he had sought to serve God as king. And ultimately, Ian gave his life in service of God. Year after year, he returned to Nigeria, knowing it was a dangerous place, and yet he went there to serve God. And there's a verse in Psalm 116, verse 5, which says this: "Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his faithful servants." And ultimately, Ian died giving his life to God. The afternoon after Ian died was horrendous. It really was terrible. Any kind of false sense of security that we had was completely taken away. We had to spend the rest of that afternoon lying on the same structure as his dead body. And a couple of the gang members came and joined us from that point on, and they were very high on drugs and just very disrespectful to us, but also to Ian, and we mean really making derogatory comments at us, and it was just really very difficult. I remember lying there, and I remember distinctly thinking, I'm never going home. I'm never ever going to see my family again. It's absolutely impossible. It's impossible. But we have to remember as Christians that we don't deal with a God that deals within the realms of possibility. We serve and worship a God that does the impossible on a regular basis. There's a verse in Luke chapter 1, right at the start of Luke's Gospel, which says, "For nothing will be impossible with God." Just to give you a bit of context to that verse, it's when the angel comes to Mary and says, "You're going to have a son. Not only are you going to have a son, but it's going to be the Son of God." And Mary says, "How can that be? I'm a virgin. That's not possible." And the angel replies to her and says, "For nothing will be impossible with God." And the fact that I'm standing here tonight shows you that nothing is impossible with God. I should have died in Nigeria. I really should have. If, at the very least, I should have come out seriously injured and harmed. But here I am tonight to testify of his goodness in every situation. For nothing will be impossible with God. Maybe you feel like you're in an impossible situation right now and you can't see a way out. You can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Well, know that nothing is impossible with God. If it's in all of God's will, it will happen no matter how impossible it seems. Maybe you're here and you're thinking, I could never have a relationship with God. And you're right. As sinful human beings, it's impossible for us to have a relationship with a holy God. But thanks be to God that that's not the end of the story. We celebrated a few weeks ago Jesus' death and resurrection because of the cross. And because of that, we can now have a relationship with God. We can now have a relationship with the creator of the universe. Not because there's anything inherently good in of ourselves, but because of Jesus' sacrifice. For nothing will be impossible with God. That night, we were then taken to a different structure where we were kept for the next 3 weeks. And this picture here is a picture that David drew after we got home. For those of you who can't quite see the picture, I'll just give you a bit of description. Like the other structure, it was made out of wood. It was completely surrounded by water. It was about 10 by 16 foot structure, so very small. This one had a roof. It didn't initially have any walls, but after about a day, they put some sheeting up at the sides of the structure that we were kept. I think to keep us from seeing the outside world, but also the outside world from seeing us. You can see in the corner of the structure there's a mattress and a mosquito net on top of it, and that's where we were kept for the next 3 weeks. We weren't allowed to leave or get off the mattress apart from to go to the toilet. As you can see, there's no toilet on the structure. Going to the toilet meant going over the side of the structure, and as you can imagine, extremely dehumanizing and just mortifying, really. The surrounding water where you went to the toilet was also where you washed. So you can imagine hygiene-wise, that was also very, very difficult. What did we do for the 3 weeks? Because several people have asked me that we spent a lot of time, as I say, reading God's Word, just because it was so essential. You find that in everyday life as well, don't you? If you spend time away from God's Word, the world stops making sense and you begin to really struggle. And we had the exact same problem in Nigeria. The more we looked at what was going on around us and really felt sorry for ourselves, the more we struggled. So it was so essential to be grounded in God's Word. We spent a lot of time in prayer. I live in Scotland now, as I say, but every other day I'm on the phone to my mum. And I communicate with my family back home really a lot. So not to be able to communicate with them over those 3 weeks was very difficult, and not to be able to reassure them was very hard. But ultimately I could communicate with the one that mattered most, and that was my Heavenly Father. He was the one that was able to get us out of that situation ultimately, and he was the only one that was important to communicate in that situation. Other than that, what else did we do? We spent a lot of time talking. David and Shirley heard every story that I have to tell over again and twice back forth. And we got to know each other very quickly, very well, as you do in that kind of situation. As far as food and water and things were concerned, we had bread and nuts that were given to us. Once a day we would have a kind of meal of instant noodles, really was what it was, and it was cooked over the fire. You can see in the corner of that picture there's a fire there. A fire is lovely if it's cold outside, but not when it's 30 plus degrees. So it was really uncomfortable, I think is the easiest way of putting it, to have that fire on and also for it to be so warm and claustrophobic and just to not have any real personal space. Throughout the time that we were on the structure, we were never physically touched or abused, and we were kept well, and that's a real answer to prayer. That's an answer to the prayer of the people here in New Craigs and back in my home that were praying, because that, as we've talked to people, that shouldn't have happened, but it did, because God did the impossible, and we were kept safe throughout that time. As far as that atmosphere on the structure was concerned, it was really changeable. The gang members, as I say, from Ian's death, were always on the structure with us, ranging from 3 men up until 14. Often a lot more of them would come at night and stay on the structure with you then. And that was very claustrophobic, just having that amount of people in such a small space under those circumstances. The head of the gang was a man referred to as the general or master, and I don't use the word lightly, but really an evil man, and really all the other gang members feared him and did whatever he said. So whenever he was on the structure, it was his silence, and there was really no kind of communication at all. I remember waking up one night to the cries of one of the gang members who had fallen asleep on watch and then was getting punished by the general for it. So that's the kind of man that he was. The other gang members were all very heavily dependent on drugs and alcohol, and were smoking a lot of cannabis, taking cocaine, and taking very strong alcohol throughout the time. So either they were intoxicated and drunk, or sober and very irritable, and very irrational in some of the things they said. A few of them would carry around guns as well, so it wasn't odd to have a gun pointed at you and jokes to be made about you being shot. And so for that reason, to feel like you were going to die wasn't abnormal. To feel like you were going to be killed was something that was around really every day. And I remember one morning waking up and just having this overwhelming feeling that I was going to die. It wasn't that there was people standing around me, but I just kept on getting this feeling that I was going to die and I was never going to go home. And the feeling was so clear that morning that I prayed to God and I said, God, look, I really, really think I'm never going to make it out of here alive. If you want me to go home, if you want me to stay alive, can you please show me in your word a verse this morning? And I wouldn't normally do that. I wouldn't normally ask for a verse in that way, but I was just really, I think, at the end of my tether. And as I was reading that morning, I read Psalm 27. And again, I wasn't aware that these verses were there until I read them that morning. But I'll read out the end of Psalm 27 for you now. Psalm 27 verses 12 to 14 says this: Deliver me not over unto the will of my enemies. For false witnesses are risen up against me, and such as breathe out cruelty. I had fainted, unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and he shall strengthen thy heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. What encouragement again that morning, that I would see the land of the living, that I would stay alive, but I had to wait. I had to wait in God's timing. And so that's what we were doing for the 3 weeks. It really was characterised mainly by waiting, obviously from day one of being kidnapped. We wanted to go home, and we prayed that every day, yet God wanted us to wait. And looking back on it now, I can see reasons in the waiting. I can see reasons why we were there for 22 days and not 1 or 2. Lessons that I learned personally, and lessons or opportunities that came about from being there for those 3 weeks. Personally, I'm a very stubborn person, very impatient, and if you don't believe me, you can ask my mum, because she's here tonight. It's really probably one of my worst attributes. But throughout those weeks, God was teaching me patience, to wait on him. It would happen, but it would be his timing. Because we were there 3 weeks, by the time we got to the final week, we actually had opportunities to share with three of the gang members that were with us. Every day, as I say, we were praying and reading God's word, and some of the gang members picked up on this. And by the time we got to the last week, they asked to join in, and that was a miracle in and of itself. The fact that they wanted to join in, that was fantastic, and seemed to have an openness. And again, that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't been there for that length of time. When we came, when they initially took us, they looked at us with utter contempt. And I'm not saying at the end of the weeks that they in any way cared for us or would have kept us alive if they'd been told to kill us, but ultimately these men were looking for something as well. They were needing something that fulfilled them, and they could see that through reading God's word and praying that we could find joy. Maybe you're in a situation right now and God's asking you to wait. It's really very difficult, waiting. It's probably one of the hardest answers to get from prayer, I find. And in this case, I had to wait for a very short period of time. I only had to wait 3 weeks, which in the grand scheme of things is really very, very short. And maybe you're waiting right now and it's been months or years and God's still not answering your prayers. Well, know there's purpose in the waiting. God doesn't waste anything. He really doesn't. And whether he's trying to teach you a lesson or he's trying to teach lessons to those around you, know that there is meaning and purposes behind it. And you might never understand what those lessons are, but know that God has reason and purpose in the waiting. For our time there, we really learned that we couldn't trust what the gang members were saying. Often they said to us, you're going to be freed on this day, and then that day would come and you would wait all day and nothing would happen. And it was so disheartening. You really felt like your heart was being crushed to have that hope lifted up and then have it been taken away. And we learned that we couldn't rely on what they said, but we could only rely on what God was telling us. And we got to the last week. We had a couple of different encouragements I'm going to share with you now from God. at that time. We were released on Friday the 3rd of November. Up until the point that we were released, we had no idea that was going to happen. And I remember the Wednesday of that week, leading up to the Friday, waking up and praying in the morning and saying, God, look, I really want to go home. Please let me go home. And almost as soon as I prayed it, I got this overwhelming sense, you're not going home today. And me being my stubborn self, it's like, oh, I must have misheard that. We've been here for almost 3 weeks. We must be going home. But sure enough, that day we didn't go home. The next morning I woke up and prayed the same, God, I really, really want to go home. And yet again, I got the overwhelming feeling, you're not going home today. And when I woke up on Friday morning, I almost didn't want to pray. I didn't want to pray and ask God to go home and get that feeling that I wasn't going home again. But whenever I woke up on the Friday and prayed it, I kept getting deliverance is coming. Over and over in my head, again and again, deliverance is coming. And at this point, I wanted deliverance to come. So how could I be sure that this was of God and not of me? How could I be sure that I wasn't just putting this in my own head? So the whole day I prayed against it. I said, God, if this is not of you, can you please take this away? But that evening, deliverance did come as we were released. And really, I've never felt anything like that or knowing God is speaking to me in that way. And it's really something that I'll keep with me for the rest of my days. There was another encouragement that we got, and this one the three of us shared together. And it was a song that we heard on that was played in the final morning. It wasn't odd for the gang members to play songs. A lot of them had mobile phones, which they would play songs off. A lot of rap music, a lot of African music, things like that. But on the Friday morning, I was sitting on the mattress, and David and Shirley were using the toilet, and this song started to play, and it came completely out of the blue. There was no song that came before it, no song that came after it, it just came on. And it felt so clear and apparent to our situation that whenever Shirley sat down beside me, she said, did you hear that? Because it was so clear to us. And as I've listened to the song since I've come home, I can see even more so from the lyrics how clearly God was speaking to us through those words that Friday morning. And I'm going to play the song for you now. And hopefully as you see the lyrics on the screen and you're able to listen to it, you'll understand that as well.
Make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me, and He will be my guide. Hold me closely to His side. With love and strength for each new day, He will make a way. He will make a way. God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me, and He will be my guide. Hold me closely to His side. With love and strength for each new day, He will make a way. He will make a way. By a roadway in the wilderness, He'll lead me, and rivers in the desert will I see. Heaven and earth will fade, but His word will still remain, and He will do something new today. Oh, God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He works in ways we cannot see. He will make a way for me, and He will be my guide. Hold me closely to His side. With love and strength for each new day, He will make a way. He will make a way. With love and strength for each new.
God will make a way. How incredible was that? Because He did make a way. That Friday night we were blindfolded and taken on the speedboat again and released. Our release and ransom was negotiated by the Nigerian government. I don't know how much they paid for the ransom, but that in and of itself was a miracle. It was God's doing, the fact that we were able to be released and got back here home safe. What now? Well, as for the clinic in Nigeria, the New Foundations Clinic was shut for several months following the kidnapping and following Ian's death. The surrounding community was really distraught and mourned the loss of both the clinic and of Ian. In January, I had the blessing of going and spending a few days with David and Shirley, and at that point they decided to reopen the clinic, which is now up and running and continuing to not only provide healthcare to the surrounding community, but tell of God's goodness in that area, and there is great work still to be done there. As Adam said at the start, there is a collection for the charity in the boxes if you want to give towards that. That would be muchly appreciated. For myself, I took a few months off work and was able to spend time with my family at home, and that was a real blessing. I never thought I was going to see my family again, so to be able to spend several months with them was really a blessing and good time to rest and recover from what had happened. Looking back, I think it is important to look at these things and learn lessons from them. We go through hardships, everyone goes through hardships, and often as soon as they're over we want to forget them. But it is good to look at the lessons that we can learn and apply them to our lives. And I'm just going to share a few of the lessons just to finish off with you that I've learned through my experiences in Nigeria. For those of you that are here and that are Christians, I first of all just want to encourage you that our God is a faithful God, and that He does not leave us nor forsake us. Up until this point in my faith, I had never really been tested overly. I had never been put in a position where everything else was taken away apart from God. And having been there and gone through it, I can testify to the fact that God is faithful throughout it, and that He will be there through your darkest days, and He will see you through them. Be bold. If God's asking you to do something, be obedient, step out. You may think you're not able to do it. I'm not a public speaker, but I'm here. But God will be there with you. Whatever He wants you to do, He will enable you to do it. Know that He is faithful and He will be with you as you do it. I want to encourage you also in the power of prayer. Both our prayers when we were in Nigeria and the prayers of those people back home were answered. Given the nature of what was going on, very few people knew about us being kidnapped at the time, and that was the advice of the Foreign Office, and that's why the amount that knew was so limited. But those that did know prayed, and I'm so thankful. I know David and Shirley are so thankful for the prayers of those that prayed here at New Craigs, because ultimately those prayers were answered, not only when we were in Nigeria, but enabling us to get home, enabling us to continue to function today. So know that God uses prayer. Don't take it for granted. It's an our privilege to be able to communicate with our Heavenly Father on a daily basis, and I know it's something that I take for granted so often, but God uses our prayers. If you're here and you're not a Christian, first of all, thank you so much for coming. It's been a real privilege to be able to share with you my experiences of my time in Nigeria and just God's goodness throughout it. But I want to leave you with a challenge. As you said already in this talk, we all have those big life questions, those ones that keep us awake at night. We all have a thing inside of us that can't be fulfilled. And I believe wholeheartedly as a Christian that is the need to have a relationship with Jesus. And I'm not saying that because it's an easy life. I think tonight will show you that that's the case. You will still encounter trials and hardships. But the blessing and the privilege of being a Christian is you won't encounter them alone. In fact, you'll have the creator of the universe at your side. And that's a very real blessing that I know and can testify to. So don't put the questions off. And I pray that you would find the answers to those questions. We're going to finish off with a song. And the song that we're going to sing is Amazing Grace, which is a song that we sang together in the structure before Ian was killed. And there's a verse in the song which says this: "When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun." And it's talking about heaven. That's where Ian is now. I know that's where I will be one day. I wholeheartedly believe that. And I pray that that will be the same for you. Thank you so much for listening.